A millionaire invites his ex-girlfriend to his wedding to humiliate her, but everything changes when she appears with twin girls who look exactly like him. The revelation shatters the ceremony as she announces they're his daughters. The chaos that follows will change everyone's lives forever. Where are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button so you don't miss more shocking stories like this one. The morning of Garrison. Fletcher's wedding dawned with the kind of perfection only money could buy. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, casting golden reflections off the champagne flutes that stood ready on the marble countertop. At 42, Garrison had mastered the art of curating his life into precisely what he wanted: successful, enviable, and meticulously controlled. He straightened his platinum cufflinks gifts from his bride tobe, watching his reflection in the mirror with satisfaction. The subtle lines around his eyes told a story of ambition fulfilled, of late nights closing deals that had transformed him from a hungry young entrepreneur into one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. Until today, that is. After today, he would be Brielle Montgomery's husband, completing another perfect acquisition in his portfolio of accomplishments. To new beginnings, his best man Xavier said, handing him a flute of champagne, and to finally settling down. Garrison smiled, but something flickered behind his eyes, a shadow so brief it might have been imagined. To new beginnings, he echoed, taking a measured sip. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. Thinking it might be Brielle with some last-minute wedding detail, he glanced at the screen. The name that appeared made his blood run cold. Thalia Winters. A name he hadn't seen in almost 6 years. A name he had deliberately erased from his life. Why now? He thought, his finger hovering over the notification. The message preview showed only 4 words: "I received your invitation." Garrison's pulse quickened. He hadn't sent Thalia an invitation. He hadn't spoken to her since that rainy afternoon when she'd told him she was pregnant, and he'd made it abundantly clear that fatherhood had no place in his 5-year plan. The memory twisted uncomfortably in his stomach. "Everything all right?" Xavier asked, noticing Garrison's sudden tension. Garrison locked his phone without opening the message. "Fine," he said, his voice controlled once more. "Just pre-wedding jitters." But as he turned back to the mirror, he couldn't ignore the uneasiness settling over him. He had spent years building walls around that chapter of his life, years convincing himself that he had made the right choice, that Thalia had surely moved on, that whatever became of that pregnancy was no longer his concern. Now, on what should have been the most controlled day of his meticulously planned life, the past he'd been running from was reaching out with 4 simple words. And deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Garrison knew that the perfect facade he had crafted was about to crack. As he straightened his tie one final time, a distant memory surfaced. Thalia's eyes bright with tears as she'd said, "Someday you'll realize what you're throwing away." He had dismissed her words then. Now they echoed in his mind like a forgotten prophecy as he prepared to walk into a future built on the foundations of everything he'd chosen over her. The clock on the wall ticked forward. 3 hours until he would stand at the altar. 3 hours until he would make vows of forever to a woman who knew nothing of his greatest betrayal. 3 hours until he would officially close the door on his past, unless the past had other plans. Garrison drained his champagne in one swift motion and set the glass down with more force than necessary. Whatever Thalia wanted, it wouldn't matter. Not today, not anymore. But even as he thought it, a cold certainty settled in his chest. The invitation she'd mentioned, the one he hadn't sent, was only the beginning of what promised to be the most unpredictable day of his life. The St. Cecilia Hotel's grand ballroom transformed into a cathedral of luxury for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over arrangements of white roses and silver eucalyptus. 300 guests filled the rows of white chairs, the air humming with anticipation, and the subtle notes of a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Garrison stood at the altar, the picture of composed confidence in his tailored tuxedo. Beside him, Brielle's father, a shipping magnate whose approval had taken Garrison years to earn, offered a knowing nod. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, the perfect merger of two powerful families, the society event of the year. Garrison scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from boardrooms and charity galas. His attention caught on an empty seat in the back row. A late arrival, perhaps. Nothing to concern himself with. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off-kilter, like the subtle warning before an earthquake. The music changed. Brielle appeared at the entrance, radiant in a gown that had cost more than most people's cars. Her smile, practiced and poised, revealed nothing of the ruthless business acumen that had first drawn Garrison to her. They were well matched, two ambitious souls who understood the value of appearance and the power of strategic alliance. As Brielle glided down the aisle on her father's arm, a movement at the back of the room caught Garrison's eye. The door had opened again, allowing a shaft of light to spill into the carefully dimmed space. A figure stood silhouetted there, a woman slender and straight-backed. The guest was late, but something about her stillness commanded attention. She didn't move to take a seat. Instead, she remained at the threshold as if waiting for something or someone. Garrison's focus snapped back to Brielle, now halfway down the aisle. But an inexplicable dread had taken root in his chest, a dread that blossomed into full-blown realization when the late arrival stepped into the light. Thalia Winters. Her dark hair was shorter than he remembered, framing a face that had grown more striking with maturity. She wore a simple emerald dress that stood out among the pastels and neutrals of the wedding guests. But it wasn't her unexpected presence that caused Garrison's carefully maintained composure to slip. It was the two small figures flanking her, each holding one of her hands. Twin girls, no more than 5 years old, with caramel-colored curls and serious expressions. Even from a distance, their resemblance to him was unmistakable. The same defined jawline, the same slight dimple in the left cheek when one of them frowned. Brielle reached the altar, her smile faltering as she registered Garrison's shocked expression. She turned, following his gaze, to the back of the room where Thalia and the girls now stood, drawing curious whispers from nearby guests. "What is it?" Brielle whispered. "Who is that?" Before Garrison could respond, Thalia took a deliberate step forward. Her voice, clear and steady, carried through the suddenly silent room. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her eyes locked with Garrison's, "but I believe these daughters of yours might want to witness their father's wedding." The collective gasp that swept through the room seemed to pull all the oxygen with it. Garrison stood frozen, the world narrowing to a tunnel that contained only Thalia's determined face and those two small girls who stared back at him with eyes that were undeniably, terrifyingly like his own. In that suspended moment, all of Garrison's carefully constructed walls began to crumble around him, revealing the foundation of lies upon which he had built his perfect life. "This is ridiculous," Garrison hissed, his voice low but sharp as he strode toward Thalia, leaving a bewildered Brielle at the altar. The wedding guests' murmurs swelled behind him like an approaching tide. "What kind of stunt are you pulling?" Thalia's chin lifted slightly, but her composure remained intact. "This isn't a stunt, Garrison. This is reality, the one you've been avoiding for 5 years." Up close, the resemblance between Garrison and the twin girls was even more striking. One clutched a small stuffed rabbit, regarding him with wary curiosity. The other stood slightly behind her mother, her small fingers digging into the fabric of Thalia's dress. "Mommy," whispered the one with the rabbit, tugging at Thalia's hand. "Is that him? Is that our daddy?" The simple question, spoken in a clear, childish voice, cut through the tension like a blade. Several guests gasped. Garrison felt the blood drain from his face. "Take them outside," he ordered, stepping closer to Thalia, his voice barely audible. "We can discuss this later." "There is no later," Thalia replied calmly. "There never was with you, that's why we're here now." Behind them, Brielle had descended from the altar, her wedding gown rustling as she approached. Her perfectly made-up face was a mask of confusion and growing anger. "Garrison," she said, her voice tight. "What is happening? Who are these children?" Before he could formulate a response that might somehow salvage the situation, Thalia turned to Brielle with unexpected gentleness. "I'm Thalia Winters. Garrison and I were together 6 years ago." She placed her hands protectively on the girls' shoulders. "This is Ren and Maeve, They turned 5 last month. Brielle's gaze darted between the twins and Garrison the mathematician, behind her eyes calculating timelines and possibilities. Her lips parted slightly as realization dawned. "You knew?" she asked Garrison, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You knew you had children." "He knew I was pregnant," Thalia answered when Garrison remained silent. "He made his choice very clear." At the time. The wedding planner appeared at Garrison's elbow, her professional smile strained. "Mr. Fletcher, perhaps we should move this discussion to a private room." Garrison nodded stiffly, grateful for the suggestion. "My office is upstairs," he said, gesturing toward the door. As he turned to follow the wedding planner, he caught sight of Xavier's face in the crowd, a mixture of shock and something that looked uncomfortably like judgment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant announced, stepping forward with forced cheer, "we're experiencing a slight delay. Please enjoy refreshments." In the adjacent hall, the crowd began to move, buzzing with barely concealed excitement at the unexpected drama. Garrison felt their stares like physical weights as he led Thalia, the twins, and Brielle toward the elevator. Inside his hotel office, the silence was deafening. Maeve, or was it Wren, climbed onto a leather chair, her feet dangling above the floor as she looked around with undisguised curiosity. Her sister remained by Thalia's side, still clutching her rabbit. "I want an explanation," Brielle demanded, her voice trembling despite her effort to control it. "And I want the truth, Garrison. All of it." Garrison ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the perfect styling that had taken his groomer 45 minutes to achieve. "This is absurd," he began, shooting a glare at Thalia. "You can't just show up and claim—" "They have your eyes," Brielle interrupted, her gaze fixed on the twins. "And your dimple, don't they, Garrison?" He fell silent, the denial dying on his lips as he truly looked at the girls for the first time. One of them, Wren, he thought, though he couldn't be sure, met his gaze unflinchingly with a directness that he recognized from his own childhood photographs. "Why now?" he finally asked Thalia. "After all this time, why crash my wedding?" Thalia's expression softened slightly. "I received an invitation 3 weeks ago. Your name, this address, today's date." She reached into her purse and produced a cream-colored envelope, extending it toward him. I thought you wanted them to know you, that you were finally ready." Garrison took the envelope, his brow furrowing as he examined it. It was indeed one of their wedding invitations, addressed in the calligrapher's distinctive script. But he hadn't sent it. He hadn't even known where to find her. "I didn't send this," he said quietly. "Then who did?" Brielle asked, her voice cutting through the room like ice. As if in answer, Garrison's phone buzzed with an incoming text. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Did you like my little surprise? Consider it a wedding gift. Some truths shouldn't stay buried. X." Garrison stared at the message, a cold realization spreading through him. Someone in his inner circle had orchestrated this entire confrontation. Someone who knew about Thalia, about the pregnancy he'd walked away from. Someone who wanted to destroy his perfect day. And as he looked up to meet the wounded eyes of his bride and the steady gaze of the woman he'd abandoned, Garrison knew that whoever had sent that invitation had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The hotel suite that had been prepared for the wedding night now served as a war room. Brielle sat rigidly on the edge of the bed, her wedding gown pooled around her like a deflated dream. She had dismissed her bridesmaids, preferring to face this humiliation without an audience. Across from her, Garrison paced the length of the room, his bow tie undone and hanging limply around his neck. 6 years ago, he began, forcing the words out. "Before I met you, before Fletcher Technologies took off." "I don't care about the timing," Brielle said, her voice hollow. "I care that you've lied to me for our entire relationship, by omission but still a lie." Outside the window, Boston's skyline glittered indifferently. Somewhere in another part of the hotel, Thalia had taken the twins to the room Garrison had arranged for them, a temporary solution while he tried to salvage what remained of his life. "It wasn't relevant," he said immediately, regretting the words as Brielle's eyes flashed with anger. "Not relevant," she repeated incredulously. "You have children, Garrison. 2 beautiful little girls who look exactly like you. How is that not relevant to the woman you were about to marry?" He stopped pacing, suddenly exhausted, I didn't think I'd ever see them, or her. I made that decision years ago. Tell me about her, Brielle demanded, her voice softer, now tinged with a curiosity that surprised him. Tell me about Thalia. Garrison sank into a chair, memories he'd suppressed for years rising to the surface. We met at Meridian Cafe. I was nobody then, just another entrepreneur with big ideas and empty pockets. She was working as a children's librarian. A faint smile touched his lips before he could stop it. She had this habit of recommending books to complete strangers based on nothing but a glance at their face. She sounds intuitive. Brielle offered her professional mask, slipping into place, the same expression she wore when analyzing a potential acquisition. She was. Garrison stared at his hands. We were together for nearly 2 years. She lived in this tiny apartment in Somerville with more books than furniture. I was working 18-hour days trying to get the company off the ground. And then she got pregnant. It wasn't a question, but Garrison nodded anyway. The timing couldn't have been worse. I'd just secured our first major investor. Everything was finally happening. A baby. He shook his head. It would have derailed everything. So you left her to deal with it alone. Brielle's voice was flat, devoid of judgment, but lacking its usual warmth. I told her I couldn't be a father. Not then. Maybe not ever. The memory of that day sliced through him with unexpected sharpness. Thalia's face devastated, but somehow unsurprised, as if she had always known he would fail this test. She said she was keeping the baby regardless. I made it clear that she would be doing it without me. Brielle was silent for a long moment. Did you ever check on her after you knew the babies would have been born? The question struck him like a physical blow. No, he admitted quietly. I convinced myself it was cleaner that way, a complete break. Cleaner for whom, Garrison? Brielle stood, gathering the voluminous skirt of her gown in one hand. For you, certainly. But what about those little girls? What about their mother? He had no answer. The justifications he'd built over the years suddenly seemed flimsy, selfish constructions, designed to protect not his ambitions, but his conscience. I need to go, Brielle said, moving toward the door. I need time to think. Brie, please. Garrison started rising from his chair. We can work through this. It doesn't change anything between us. She turned back, her expression incredulous. It changes everything. Not because you have children, although that's certainly significant, but because I just realized I'm engaged to a man I don't actually know. She twisted the 5-carat diamond from her finger and placed it on the dresser. A man who could walk away from his own flesh and blood and never look back. The soft click of the door closing behind her was more devastating than if she had slammed it. Garrison stood alone in the suite, surrounded by the wreckage of the life he had so carefully constructed. His phone buzzed again. Another message. From the unknown number. The truth will set you free, or at least show you who you really are. Garrison hurled the phone across the room, where it hit the wall with a satisfying crack. But the action brought no relief from the question now reverberating through his mind. Who was he really? The successful businessman who had everything, or the coward who had abandoned his family when they needed him most, and more pressingly, which man did he want to be from this day forward? Morning light filtered through the blinds of Garrison's penthouse, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like silent witnesses to his restless night. He'd spent hours staring at the ceiling, his mind cycling through memories he'd long suppressed. Thalia's laugh, the way she'd curl against him in sleep, the look on her face the day he walked away. Now, as he studied his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he hardly recognized the man staring back. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the confident set of his jaw had given way to a tension that aged him. Somewhere in this building, on a floor far below his Thalia, and 2 little girls, his daughters, were beginning their day. His daughters. The thought still felt foreign, abstract. He had been prepared to become Brielle's husband, a role that came with clear expectations and boundaries. But father, the word itself triggered a visceral panic, a throwback to that rain-soaked afternoon when he'd made the decision that had led to this fractured morning. The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, he found no one but a manila envelope on the floor. Inside was a single sheet of paper, paperwork for a DNA test with an appointment scheduled for 11 a.m. A post-it note in Talia's neat handwriting read, "For everyone's peace of mind. The girls will be there." 3 hours later, Garrison sat in a sterile clinic watching as a technician gently swabbed the inside of Maeve's cheek. The child squirmed slightly, but remained cooperative, her eyes, so disconcertingly like his own, never leaving his face. "It tickles," she informed him solemnly, after the technician moved on to her sister. "I imagine it does," Garrison replied, unsure how to speak to a 5-year-old. Should he use a different tone, simpler words? The uncertainty made him acutely aware of all he'd missed. 5 years of learning who these small people were, of becoming fluent in the language of fatherhood. Thalia stood nearby, her posture guarded, but her expression open as she watched the interaction. She looked different in daylight, more tired than he remembered, but with a quiet strength that was new. "They've been asking about you," she said quietly, when the girls became distracted by a picture book, especially in the last year. "What? Did you tell them?" He kept his voice low, conscious of small ears that might be listening despite appearances. The truth, that their father wasn't ready to be a dad when they were born. She met his gaze directly. "I never told them you didn't want them. Just that you weren't ready." The distinction struck him as both generous and devastating. "Thank you for that," he said, surprised by the emotion tightening his throat. When his turn came for the test, Ren, the quieter of the two he was learning, watched with clinical interest. "Does it hurt?" she asked as the technician approached with a fresh swab. "Not at all," Garrison assured her, opening his mouth to demonstrate. As the technician collected his sample, he caught Ren's slight nod of approval and felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. "Results will be available within 48 hours, the technician informed them, sealing the samples. Outside the clinic, an awkward silence fell. The girls, sensing the tension, drew closer to Thalia. "I'd like to—" Garrison began, then faltered. What did he want? To make amends? To establish visitation? To pretend none of this had happened and return to his orderly life? "I'd like to get to know them," he finally said, "if that's possible." Something flickered across Thalia's face. Relief, perhaps, or wariness. "That would be their choice," she replied. "But we could start with lunch. They're hungry, and I'm guessing you haven't eaten either." It was such a practical suggestion, so typically Thalia, that Garrison found himself nodding before he could overthink it. "There's a good place around the corner. Kid-friendly," he added, as if to prove he had considered their needs. As they walked, Maeve darted ahead, her energy irrepressible. Ren stayed close to Thalia, occasionally glancing up at Garrison, with an expression that seemed too assessing for a 5-year-old. At the restaurant, he found himself watching them, cataloguing details with the same intensity he applied to business. Acquisitions, Maeve's left-handedness, Ren's methodical arrangement of her napkin and silverware, the way they both tilted their heads at the same angle when considering the children's menu. "Why do you live in a hotel?" Maeve asked abruptly, breaking his reverie. "It's not just any hotel," he explained, surprised by the question. "I own the building. The top floor is my home." "Like Eloise," Ren murmured, exchanging a knowing look with her sister. "Eloise," Garrison repeated, confused. "It's a book about a little girl who lives in the Plaza Hotel," Thalia explained. "We read it last month." "She has adventures," Maeve added, stabbing a French fry in his direction. "Do you have adventures in your hotel?" The question caught him off guard. Did he have adventures? His days were filled with meetings, decisions, the accumulation of wealth and influence. But adventures? Not the kind Eloise would approve of, I'm afraid, he admitted. Maeve looked disappointed. Ren, however, studied him with renewed interest. "Maybe you just haven't found the right adventure yet," she suggested with a gravity that made him wonder if she was truly only 5. Later, as they prepared to part ways outside the restaurant, Garrison found himself reluctant to end the encounter. Would it be all right if I saw them again tomorrow?" he asked Thalia. She hesitated, then nodded. "I think that would be okay, but Garrison—" Her voice dropped so the girls couldn't hear. "Don't start this if you're not serious. They're not a novelty or a project. They're people with hearts that can be broken." The warning was fair, he knew. He had proven himself unreliable where family was concerned. "I understand," he said, and was surprised to realize he meant it. As he watched them walk away, Ren turned back once, raising a small hand in a tentative wave. Garrison returned the Keizun gesture, a strange ache forming in his chest, the sensation of something long dormant beginning to awaken. That night, alone in his penthouse, he found himself Googling Eloise at the plaza and ordering a copy to be delivered the next day. It was a small gesture, insignificant in the grand scheme of the chaos he'd created. But as he closed his laptop, he realized it was the first decision he'd made in years that had nothing to do with business appearances or ambition, and everything to do with a pair of serious little eyes that had looked at him and seen not the successful CEO, but simply a man who might possibly become a father. The DNA test results arrived via email on Wednesday morning, though Garrison had known what they would show from the moment he'd looked into the twins' eyes. The clinical language, 99.99% probability of paternity, rendered in black and white. What his instincts had already confirmed, Ren and Maeve were unquestionably his daughters. He sat at his desk, the document open on his computer screen, unsure of what he was feeling. Relief, panic. A strange, unexpected sense of pride. He printed a copy, his fingers lingering on the warm paper as it emerged from the printer. Proof of connection. Evidence of a bond he had denied for 5 years. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Fletcher, Ms. Montgomery is here to see you." Brielle. They had barely spoken since the wedding disaster 4 days ago. She had moved back to her own apartment, declining his calls and responding to texts with terse, business-like replies. He took a deep breath, straightening his tie, a reflex when confronting difficult situations. "Send her in." Brielle entered as polished as ever in a tailored navy suit, her expression unreadable. Gone was the soft warmth that had characterized their private moments, replaced by the cool efficiency she typically reserved for boardrooms. "I've been thinking," she began without preamble, taking a seat across from him. "About us." "About what happened?" Garrison nodded, waiting. On his desk, the DNA results lay face up, the words "positive match" visible in bold type. Brielle's gaze flicked to the document, then back to his face. "So it's confirmed," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes." A silence stretched between them, filled with all the future plans now derailed, all the shared dreams now called into question. "I can't marry you," Brielle finally said, her voice softening slightly. "Not now. Maybe not ever." Though he had anticipated this, the finality of her words still landed like a physical blow. "I understand," he managed. "I would have told you about them if I'd known." "Would you?" she challenged, tilting her head. "Or would you have kept running from that part of your life, just as you've been doing for 5 years? The question hung in the air, uncomfortably perceptive. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'd like to think I would have done the right thing." "That's the problem, Garrison. I don't know if you even recognize what the right thing is anymore." She leaned forward, her expression earnest now rather than accusatory. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? A man who's built his entire identity around success and appearances, someone who discarded a woman carrying his child because it didn't fit his 5-year plan." Her words stung with their accuracy. "People change," he said, though the defense sounded weak even to his own ears. "They do," Brielle agreed. "But it takes more than a DNA test and a ruined wedding to change someone fundamentally. It takes time, effort, genuine remorse." She stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced grace. "Those little girls deserve better than a father who sees them, has an inconvenience to be managed, and I deserve better than a husband who could lie to me about something so important." As she moved toward the door, Garrison felt a strange sense of loss, not just of Brielle but of the life he had imagined for himself. The clean, uncomplicated future now replaced by messier, more demanding possibilities. "I'm seeing them again. Today," he said, surprising himself with the admission. "The girls were going to the Children's Museum." Brielle paused, her expression softening slightly. "Good," she said. "That's good, Garrison." A hint of her former warmth returned to her eyes. "Maybe there's hope for you yet." After she left, Garrison sat motionless, her words echoing in his mind. Hope. It wasn't a concept he typically applied to himself. Hope was for people who couldn't control outcomes, who couldn't bend circumstances to their will through sheer determination and resources. He had long prided himself on not needing such intangible comforts. Yet as he picked up the DNA results, again tracing the lines that connected him irrevocably to Ren and Maeve, he found himself wondering if hope might be exactly what he needed now. Hope that he could become the kind of man, the kind of father they deserved. His phone chimed with a text from Thalia. "Still on for 2 p.m. The girls are excited about the museum." He typed a response, deleting and rewriting it several times before settling on simple honesty. "I'll be there." Test results came back positive. Not that we needed confirmation. Her reply came quickly. "No, we didn't. But sometimes seeing things in black and white helps make them real." He stared at her words, struck by their wisdom. Making things real. Wasn't that what he'd been avoiding for 5 years? The reality of fatherhood, of responsibility to someone, other than himself, of connections that couldn't be severed with a check or a change of address. Later that afternoon, as he watched Ren methodically constructing an elaborate marble run, while Maeve bounced from exhibit to exhibit with boundless energy, Garrison felt something shift within him. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. Family, fatherhood, connection. They were flesh and blood, curiosity and laughter, stubborn independence and unexpected vulnerability. "Watch this," Maeve called, her voice carrying across the exhibit hall as she prepared to send a giant bubble aloft. Thalia moved to her side, helping guide her hands through the soapy solution. Beside him, Ren continued her focused construction, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "It needs to be higher here," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "For proper velocity." "Proper velocity," Garrison repeated, hiding a smile. "Where did you learn about velocity?" She glanced up at him, surprised by his interest. "From my science book. I like physics." She handed him a curved piece of track. "You can help if you want. This part's tricky." The casual offer, delivered with such matter-of-fact confidence, felt like an unexpected gift. As he knelt beside her, following her precise instructions, Garrison realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his next meeting, his investment portfolio, or his public image. Instead, his entire focus had narrowed to this moment, helping his daughter, build something that mattered to her. When the marble finally completed the run, sailing smoothly through the elaborate construction and landing with a satisfying plunk in the collection cup, Ren's face lit up with triumph. She turned to him, her smile transforming her serious expression into something radiant. "We did it. We did," Garrison agreed, surprised by the swell of emotion her simple joy evoked. "Nice engineering, Ren." She beamed at the compliment, then hesitated, studying his face with a child's directness. "Are you really our dad?" she asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Mom said you are, but—" The question caught him off guard, though he should have expected it. "Yes," he said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I am." Ren nodded, absorbing this confirmation. "Where were you before?" The simplicity of the question belied its complexity. How did one explain ambition, fear, and selfishness to a 5-year-old? "I was working," he said finally, "building my company, but I should have been with you and your sister and your mom." "Are you going to disappear again?" The question was practical, not accusatory, but it pierced him nonetheless. "No." He found himself promising. "I'm not going anywhere, Ren." She considered this, her expression serious once more. "Okay," she said finally. "But if you do, can you at least say goodbye first? It's rude to just disappear." The childish reprimand, delivered with such earnest gravity, nearly undid him. "You're absolutely right," he managed. "It would be very rude." Satisfied with his answer, Ren turned back to the marble run, already planning modifications. But Garrison remained still, her words echoing in his mind. It's rude to just disappear. The simple wisdom of a child cutting through all his sophisticated justifications and carefully constructed narratives. It was rude and cowardly and selfish to disappear, to abandon people who needed him, to prioritize his ambitions over human connection. The realization settled over him like a weight, but also like a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Across the room, he caught Thalia watching him, her expression unreadable. As their eyes met, something passed between them, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. A shared acknowledgement that whatever happened next would reshape all their lives in ways they couldn't yet predict. And for once, Garrison Fletcher, master planner, strategic thinker, controller of outcomes, was prepared to step into an uncertain future without guarantees, armed with nothing but a promise to a solemn 5-year-old that he would not disappear again. "Mr. Fletcher, there's a call for you on line 2, a Ms. Winters." Garrison looked up from the contract he'd been reviewing, surprised. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding disaster, and he'd fallen into a tentative routine with Thalia and the twins' dinner twice a week, Sunday afternoons at the park or museum, occasional ice cream outings. But she rarely called him at the office. "Put her through," he said, straightening in his chair. "Garrison," Thalia's voice came through, sounding slightly harried, "I'm sorry to bother you at work, but there's a situation." His stomach tightened. "Are the girls okay?" "They're fine," she assured him quickly. "It's just, Maeve's school is putting on a play this afternoon. The Very Hungry Caterpillar. She's playing the butterfly at the end." "Okay," he said cautiously, not seeing the emergency. "I'm stuck at the library. A pipe burst in the children's section, and there's water everywhere. I can't get away." The frustration in her voice was palpable. "Normally, I'd ask my neighbor, Mrs. Levinson, to take her, but she's visiting her daughter in Chicago. I know it's short notice, but—" "What time is the play?" Garrison interrupted, already pulling up his calendar. Thalia paused, clearly surprised by his immediate response. 2 o'clock, at Little Scholars Montessori on Beacon Street. But Garrison, you have to understand, this is a room full of 5-year-olds in construction paper costumes. It's not exactly a high-stakes business presentation." "I'm aware," he said, amused by her warning. "I can reschedule my 2 o'clock. It's just a preliminary budget review." There was silence on the other end of the line. "You'd do that for a kindergarten play?" "She's my daughter," he said simply, surprising himself with how natural the words now felt. "And apparently she's the butterfly. Sounds like a crucial role." Thalia's laugh, soft and genuine, stirred memories he'd been trying to keep at bay. "The most crucial. Thank you, Garrison. She'll be thrilled. Wren will be there too. She's helping with the props." After hanging up, Garrison sat for a moment, absorbing the significance of what had just happened. 3 weeks ago, he would have considered a children's play an inconvenience, certainly not worth rescheduling an important meeting. Now he found himself genuinely looking forward to it. 2 hours later, he slipped into the back of a classroom transformed by childish decorations into a magical garden. Parents sat on tiny chairs, smartphones at the ready. At the front of the room, a teacher was guiding a line of small children in fruit costumes to their positions. "You came." He turned to find Wren standing beside him, a clipboard clutched importantly to her chest. She wore a black t-shirt and what appeared to be a headset fashioned from pipe cleaners. "I did," he said, smiling at her official-looking attire. "Oh, your mum said you're working on props." Wren nodded solemnly. "I'm the stage manager. That means I'm in charge of making sure everything happens at the right time." She pointed to her clipboard, which held a remarkably detailed sequence of events, written in careful printing. "It's a big responsibility." "I'm sure you're excellent at it," Garrison said, impressed by her thoroughness. "Very organized." She beamed at the compliment. "You can sit there," she said, pointing to an empty chair, "in the 3rd row. That's where Mum usually sits. I have to go check on the hungry caterpillar. He keeps eating the real apple instead of the pretend one." As she hurried away, clipboard bouncing against her leg, Garrison felt a strange tightness in his chest. He was seeing a side of his daughters he'd never imagined. Their personalities, their interests, the small daily dramas that made up their world. A world that had existed entirely without him until now. The play itself was predictably chaotic. Lines forgotten, props dropped, one child refusing to relinquish the microphone during his moment as a piece of chocolate cake. But when Maeve emerged at the end, resplendent in a costume of iridescent fabric, and pipe cleaner antennae, her face alight with the joy of transformation, Garrison found himself unexpectedly moved. "And now I am a beautiful butterfly," she declared, spreading her fabric wings wide as the audience erupted in applause. Later, as the children and parents mingled over juice boxes and cookies, Maeve spotted him across the room and came running, still in her butterfly wings. "You saw me," she exclaimed, flinging herself at him with characteristic enthusiasm. "Did you like the play? Did you see when I flew?" "I did," he assured her awkwardly, returning her hug. Physical affection with the girls was still new territory for him. "You were an excellent butterfly, very metamorphosed." Maeve giggled at the big word. "That means changed," she informed him seriously. "Like how the caterpillar changed into me." "Exactly right," he said, impressed by her vocabulary. "Speaking of changes, I think we should celebrate your theatrical debut. How about ice cream after school?" Her eyes widened. "On a Thursday, Mum says ice cream is for weekends and special occasions." "I think your first starring role qualifies as a special occasion," Garrison said, smiling at her excitement. "We'll ask your mom when she picks you up, but I think she'll agree." "Ask me what?" Thalia had appeared beside them, slightly damp around the edges, but smiling. She knelt to hug Maeve, admiring the butterfly costume up close. "You were wonderful. Butterfly girl, I'm so sorry I missed the beginning. Dad saw the whole thing." Maeve said the word dad slipping out naturally, as if she'd been using it all her life. "And he says we can have ice cream because it's a special occasion." Garrison felt himself freeze at the casual use of dad, a title he'd done nothing to earn. He glanced at Thalia, expecting to see disapproval or concern, but her expression held only a quiet acknowledgement. She nodded slightly as if giving permission, not just for the ice cream, but for the name for this tentative new reality they were constructing. "Ice cream sounds perfect for a butterfly celebration," she agreed, standing. To address Garrison directly, "Thank you for coming, for being here for her. I wouldn't have missed it," he said, meaning it more than he'd expected to. "It was enlightening." As they walked together toward the ice cream shop, the girls skipping ahead, Thalia glanced at him curiously. "Enlightening in what way, Garrison?" Considered the question, watching, as Wren waited patiently at the crosswalk while Maeve bounced on her toes beside her. "I've been seeing them as extensions of myself," he admitted. "My genes, my responsibility, my project in a way. But today, watching Maeve in that play, seeing Wren with her clipboard and her serious little frown," he struggled to articulate the shift in his perspective. "They're their own people, complete complex individuals who exist independently of me or my feelings about them." Thalia's steps slowed, her expression softening. "Yes," she said simply. "They are. That's what makes parenting so terrifying and so wonderful. You can guide them, love them, try to protect them, but ultimately, they are who they are." "You've done an incredible job with them," Garrison said, the compliment sincere. "They're remarkable children." "They are," Thalia agreed without false modesty. "But they're still children who need their parents, both of them if possible." The implication was clear. His presence in their lives could no longer be casual or convenient. It had to be a commitment sustained through bedtimes and stomach aches, homework frustrations and playground triumphs, butterfly costumes and beyond. As they reached the ice cream shop, Garrison found himself wondering if he was capable of such commitment. His track record suggested otherwise. Yet watching Maeve press her nose against the glass display, debating the merits of rainbow sprinkles versus chocolate chips with complete seriousness, he felt something shifting within him, a realignment of priorities that would have been unimaginable 6 weeks ago. "Daddy, what kind are you getting?" Maeve called the title, still new enough to send a jolt through him each time she used it. "I'm not sure yet," he called back, moving to join them at the counter. "What do you recommend?" "Chocolate with rainbow sprinkles," she said decisively. "It's the best combination." "Then that's what I'll have," he agreed, earning a beaming smile. Later, as they sat at a small table, the girls engrossed in their ice cream, Thalia leaned toward him. "I'm telling you now," she said quietly. "There will be days when showing up for a school play or ice cream seems the easiest thing in the world, and there will be days when being their father feels impossible, when they're sick or scared or angry, when they need things you don't know how to give." "I know," Garrison said, though in truth he couldn't begin to imagine the challenges she described. "Do you—" Thalia's gaze was penetrating. "Because the hardest thing about parenting isn't showing up for the butterfly moments, Garrison. It's staying present for all the caterpillar days, the ordinary, messy, sometimes boring reality of raising children. The warning was fair, he knew. He had proven himself unreliable once before. What guarantee could he offer that this time would be different? Across the table, Wren looked up from her careful dissection of a hot fudge sundae. "Are you coming to my science fair next week?" she asked, the question casual but her eyes watchful. "I'm doing an experiment about which paper airplane design flies the farthest." It was a test whether she knew it or not, a small moment of truth disguised as a simple question. "I wouldn't miss it," Garrison said, meeting her gaze directly. "In fact, I might know a thing or two about aerodynamics." "If you'd like some help with your designs?" Wren's face brightened. "Really, can we start tomorrow? I have all my materials ready." "Tomorrow it is," he agreed, aware of Thalia watching this exchange with guarded hope. As they left the ice cream, Jacques Maeve's small hand slipped into his sticky with melted chocolate, but trusting in a way he'd done nothing to deserve. The weight of it, both literally and figuratively, felt like an anchor, tethering him to a version of himself he was just beginning to discover. And for the first time since Thalia had appeared at his wedding with 2 small girls in tow, Garrison found himself grateful for the disruption of his carefully ordered life, for the chance to know these extraordinary children and perhaps to become worthy of that simple, sticky-fingered trust. The conference room fell silent as Garrison finished his presentation. On the projection screen behind him, the quarterly earnings report showed growth that exceeded even their most optimistic projections. Around the table board, members exchanged impressed glances. "Remarkable numbers," Janet Chen, the CFO, commented, "especially considering the personal distractions of the past 2 months. Garrison nodded, accepting the veiled reference to his wedding disaster and subsequent personal revelations with equanimity. 2 months ago, such a comment would have triggered damage control mode, a carefully crafted narrative to protect his image. Now he simply acknowledged it as fact. "Thank you, Janet. Our team has performed exceptionally well." As the meeting concluded, Walter Kingsley, the company's co-founder and oldest board member, lingered behind. "Walk with me," he suggested, gesturing toward the door. In the hallway, Walter cut straight to the point. "The Singapore expansion. We need someone on the ground there for the next 3 months to oversee the transition. You're the obvious choice." Garrison felt a conflicting surge of excitement and dread. The Singapore project was his brainchild, the culmination of 2 years of strategic planning. 3 months ago, he would have accepted without hesitation, seeing it as another triumph in his meteoric career. Now, his first thought was of twin girls, with science projects and ballet recitals of weekend pancake breakfasts that had become a tentative tradition of trust, still fragile as spun glass. "I'm flattered," he began carefully, "but I'm not sure the timing is right for me to be away that long." Walter's eyebrows rose. "Because of your new family situation." The words were neutral, but Garrison detected a hint of judgment. "I understand you're trying to make amends, Gary, but this is a pivotal moment for the company. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary." Sacrifices. The word echoed in Garrison's mind, recalling Thalia's warning about butterfly moments versus caterpillar days. Was this the first real test of his commitment? "Let me think about it," he said finally. "I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow." That evening he arrived at Thalia's modest townhouse in Cambridge for their regular Friday dinner. The contrast between her home and his sleek penthouse always struck him, not because hers was lacking in any way, but because it was so evidently a home. Children's artwork adorned the refrigerator, well-worn books filled the shelves, and a collection of mismatched throw pillows made the living room feel inviting rather than curated. "Dad's here," Maeve called, running to greet him at the door with her customary enthusiasm. Behind her, Wren looked up from a complex Lego structure she was building, offering a more reserved but equally genuine smile. "Just in time," Thalia said, emerging from the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready. The girls made the salad." "With croutons shaped like stars," Maeve informed him proudly. "We used cookie cutters." During dinner, a simple but delicious pasta dish. That reminded Garrison of meals they'd shared years ago. He found himself unusually quiet, his mind preoccupied with Walter's offer. The Singapore project represented everything he'd worked toward professionally. But accepting it would mean breaking the fragile routine he'd established with the twins, undoing months of careful trust-building. "You're distracted," Thalia observed. After the girls had been excused to watch their allotted half-hour of television before bedtime. "Work issue." Garrison nodded, twirling the stem of his water glass. "They want me to go to Singapore for 3 months starting next week." "Ah." Thalia's expression remained neutral. "Important opportunity. Very. It's the expansion I've been planning for years. I'd be overseeing the entire Asia-Pacific launch." She was quiet for a moment, studying him. "Are you asking my permission or telling me your decision?" The question caught him off guard. "Neither, I guess. I haven't decided yet." "What's holding you back?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Garrison gestured toward the living room where the sounds of the girls' laughter drifted in. 2 months ago, I promised Ren I wouldn't disappear again. Now I'm considering doing exactly that." 3 months isn't forever," Thalia pointed out. "And there's video calls, care packages, ways to stay connected." He looked at her, surprised. You think I should go?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you need to decide what kind of father you want to be. If this project is truly important to you, we can make it work. The girls are more resilient than you might think." She paused, then added more softly, "But if you go, you have to be honest with them. Explain how long you'll be gone when you'll be back. No vague promises." Garrison nodded, considering her words. "And what if they forget about me while I'm gone? What if we lose this connection we're building?" The vulnerability in the question surprised them both. Thalia's expression softened. "They won't forget you, Garrison. You're their father. But they will remember if you make a promise and don't keep it. So whatever you decide, be certain you can follow through." Later, after he'd read bedtime stories and said goodnight to the girls, Garrison stood in the hallway looking at the photographs that lined the wall, a timeline of moments he'd missed. First steps, first days of school, Halloween costumes and birthday cakes with missing candles. His phone buzzed with a text from Walter. "Decision." Garrison stared at the message, the weight of the choice heavy on his shoulders. Singapore represented the culmination of his professional ambitions, the validation of years of strategic vision. But standing in this hallway surrounded by evidence of all he'd already missed, he found his priorities shifting in ways he hadn't anticipated. He typed a response. "I need to pass on Singapore. I can oversee remotely and make shorter trips, but I can't be away for 3 months right now. Family obligations." Walter's reply was swift and curt. "Disappointing. We'll discuss alternatives tomorrow." Garrison slipped the phone back into his pocket, surprised by the lack of regret he felt. The decision that would have seemed unthinkable 3 months ago now felt right. Not easy, but right. "You're staying," Thalia said from the doorway, not a question, but an observation. "I'm staying," he confirmed. "There will be other projects. There won't be another chance to see Ren win the science fair or help Maeve practice for her dance recital." Something shifted in Thalia's expression, a softening, a reassessment. "That's not what I expected you to choose," she admitted. "It's not what I expected either," Garrison said with a rueful smile. "But it feels like the right choice." As he prepared to leave, Thalia walked him to the door. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think you made the right decision. Not because Singapore isn't important, but because you're showing them, and yourself, what really matters to you." Her words stayed with him during the drive back to his penthouse, which felt emptier than usual after the warm chaos of Thalia's home. Hanging his jacket in the pristine closet, Garrison realized that for the first time in his adult life, he had made a major decision based not on ambition or strategic advantage, but on love. Imperfect still, developing but genuine love for 2 small people who were changing his definition of success in ways he was only beginning to understand. The kitchen in Garrison's penthouse had always been a showpiece, rather than a functional space. High-end appliances chosen for their aesthetic appeal, rarely used by the man who lived there. But on this Sunday morning, the sleek surfaces were dusted, with flower bowls of varying sizes cluttered the counter, and the air smelled of melting butter and maple syrup. "More blueberries," Maeve directed, standing on a step stool beside him, her small hands coated in batter. "They're the most important part." "I thought you said chocolate chips were the most important part," Garrison teased, nevertheless adding another handful of blueberries to the batter. "They're both important," she clarified with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster for such matters. "The blueberries make them healthy, and the chocolate chips make them happy." Across the kitchen island, Wren methodically arranged plates and silverware, her brow furrowed in concentration as she ensured each setting was precisely aligned. 3 months into their new family arrangement, Garrison had come to recognize this attention to detail as her response to uncertainty, a way of creating order in a world that had recently shifted beneath her feet. "Mom says the first pancake always comes out wrong," she informed him as he prepared to pour the first ladle of batter onto the griddle. "It's a scientific principle." "Is that so?" Garrison smiled, touched by the way she elevated her mother's cooking wisdom to the status of scientific law. "Well, we'll see if that principle holds in this kitchen." To his dismay, the first pancake did indeed come out misshapen and unevenly cooked, confirming Thalia's pancake theorem. Wren nodded knowingly, accepting this evidence with satisfaction. "Can I flip the next one?" Maeve asked, bouncing on her stool with anticipation. "Let's do it together," he suggested, guiding her small hand on the spatula. The resulting flip was less than graceful, but Maeve's delight at the partially folded pancake was worth the imperfection. The doorbell rang just as they were setting, the last of the pancakes on a serving platter. "That's Mom," Maeve announced, jumping down from her stool and racing toward the door before Garrison could stop her. He followed more slowly, suddenly aware of the flour on his shirt and the general disarray of his usually immaculate home. Not that Thalia would care. She had seen him in far less polished states during their time together. But something about her visiting his space after all these years made him unexpectedly self-conscious. Maeve had already flung the door open by the time he reached the entryway. Thalia stood there looking fresh and relaxed in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, in a way that reminded him of Sunday mornings from their past. "Something smells delicious," she said, accepting Maeve's enthusiastic hug. Her eyes met Garrison's over their daughter's head, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Successful pancake operation." "Mostly," he admitted, "though your first pancake theory was proven correct." Her laugh was warm and familiar. "It always is. It's practically a law of physics." As they settled around the dining table, rarely used before the twins had entered his life, Garrison found himself watching Thalia with a new awareness. She moved through his space with easy grace, helping the girls with syrup, engaging Wren in a serious discussion about the optimal pancake-to-blueberry ratio, her presence bringing a vitality to the penthouse that had been conspicuously absent before. "These are actually good," she said after tasting a bite, her surprise evident. "I figured we'd be eating charcoal discs." "Your lack of faith wounds me," Garrison replied with mock offense. "I'll have you know I've been practicing." "He has," Wren confirmed solemnly. "Last Saturday we had to order pizza because the pancakes were black on the outside and gooey inside." "Traitor," Garrison whispered to her with a wink, making her giggle, a sound that still delighted him with its rarity. After breakfast, while the girls explored the forbidden zone Garrison's home office recently opened to supervised investigations, Thalia helped him clear the dishes. "You seem different," she observed, handing him a plate to load into the dishwasher. "More settled somehow." He considered this assessment. "I feel different," he admitted. "Less driven in some ways, but more, I don't know. Present, engaged, happier," she suggested quietly. The question caught him off guard. Was he happier? He had always equated happiness with achievement, with forward momentum, with the acquisition of success markers. The past 3 months had been the opposite of that in many ways. A slowing down, a turning inward, a reorientation of priorities. "Yes," he realized, surprised by the truth of it. "I am happier. Not constantly, not perfectly, but fundamentally. Even when Maeve had that meltdown at the grocery store last week, or when I had to miss that investor dinner for Wren's fever." Thalia studied him, her expression thoughtful. "That's called being a parent," she said finally, The paradox of finding joy in the chaos, purpose in the interruptions. "You make it sound poetic," he said with a smile. It felt anything but poetic. "When Ren was throwing up at 3 in the morning. Even that has its moments," Thalia countered. "The trust in her eyes when you held her hair back. The way she fell asleep against your shoulder afterward." She paused, then added more softly, "You've surprised me, Garrison. I didn't think you'd take to this so naturally." The compliment warmed him in a way that professional accolades never had. "I've surprised myself," he admitted, "and I have a lot to make up for still." "It's not about making up for the past," Thalia said, handing him the last plate. "It's about being present now, which you are." From the office came the sound of Maeve's delighted laughter, followed by Ren's more measured response. The normalcy of it, his daughters playing in his home, Thalia in his kitchen, felt both miraculous and somehow inevitable, as if the universe had finally corrected a long-standing error. "I've been thinking," he said, closing the dishwasher and turning to face her directly, "about making some changes, to accommodate them better when they stay here." Thalia raised an eyebrow, curious. "Changes like what?" "Converting the guest suite into bedrooms for them. Real ones, not just the temporary setup we have now. Ren needs her own books and science things, and Maeve needs space for, well, all her energy." He hesitated, then added, "And I'm looking at properties closer to Cambridge, to be nearer to their school and your place." Something flickered in Thalia's eyes, surprise, maybe approval. "That's a big move." "It makes sense," he said simply. "This place was never meant for children. It's all sharp corners and white furniture. And entirely too many floors between the sidewalk and your front door," Thalia added with a slight smile. "Maeve counted the elevator buttons the last time. They were here. 27 is a lot of floors for little legs." Before he could respond, the girls reappeared, Maeve clutching a blueprint she'd discovered in his office. "Dad, what's this building?" "It looks like a castle." Garrison took the blueprint, recognizing it immediately as an early concept design for the Singapore headquarters, the project he'd declined to oversee in person. "Not quite a castle," he explained, kneeling to her level. "It's an office building my company is making in Singapore, very far away from here." "Can we visit?" she asked, tracing the lines with a small finger. "I want to see a real castle." "Someday," he promised, his gaze meeting Thalia's over Maeve's head. "Not right away, but someday. As a family." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Its meaning shifting, expanding, encompassing possibilities neither of them had imagined 3 months ago. Thalia's expression softened, a careful hope in her eyes that mirrored what Garrison felt, growing in his own heart, that perhaps the broken pieces of their past might yet form something new, something stronger, something built on more solid foundations than before. Later, after Thalia and the girls had left with promises to return the following weekend, Garrison stood in his silent penthouse, the echoes of their presence still lingering in the air. For the first time, the pristine space felt not like an achievement, to be admired, but like an incomplete canvas awaiting the colorful chaos of real life. He pulled out his phone and texted his real estate agent, ready to look at those Cambridge properties. The sooner the better. The response was immediate. "Great, I have several options that match your criteria. Family move." Garrison stared at the question, at once simple and profound. Was it a family move? Were they becoming a family? Not just co-parents sharing custody, but something more integrated, more holistic. He typed a response, "Yes, for my family." Sending the text felt like a commitment, a declaration of intent, not a promise of reconciliation with Thalia. That path remained uncertain, complex, fraught with the history of past hurts and present cautions. But a promise to himself, to Ren and Maeve, that whatever shape their future took, they would face it. Together, connected not just by DNA and legal obligation, but by choice, by love. And for now, that promise, like Sunday pancakes and science fair projects like bedtime stories and butterfly costumes, felt like enough, a foundation upon which everything else could gradually, carefully be built. "This one has potential," the real estate agent said, leading Garrison through a stately Victorian in Cambridge. 4 bedrooms, fully renovated, kitchen, original woodwork throughout. The backyard isn't huge, but there's enough space for a swing set or garden. Garrison nodded mentally, cataloguing the home's features against his newly developed criteria. Proximity to the girls' school, bedrooms with good natural light for Wren's plants and science experiments, a safe street for Maeve's bicycle, a kitchen where Sunday pancakes could become a permanent tradition. "There's one more thing," he said, following the agent through a sunny dining room. "What's the guest house situation?" The agent brightened. "I was saving that for last. There's a carriage house at the back of the property completely renovated as a one-bedroom apartment, perfect for visiting grandparents or their mother," Garrison completed quietly. The arrangement had been Thalia's idea, surprising him with its practicality and boundary-respecting consideration. "The girls need consistency," she had explained over coffee last week. "Shuttling between two homes works for now, but as they get older, having one home base would be better. If you found a place with a guest house or in-law apartment, I could stay there when it's your time with them. That way they're not constantly packing bags and adjusting to different routines." The suggestion had revealed how much Thalia was willing to reorganize her life around the girls' needs and indirectly around his growing presence in their lives. The generosity of it humbled him. Now, stepping into the converted carriage house, Garrison could immediately picture Thalia here. The built-in bookshelves along one wall would hold her beloved classics and poetry collections. The small but efficient kitchen would accommodate her weekend baking projects with the girls. The reading nook beneath the window seemed designed for her Sunday morning ritual of tea and the newspaper. "What do you think?" the agent asked, noting his thoughtful expression. "I think we should make an offer," Garrison replied. "Today." 3 weeks later, Garrison stood in the empty living room of the Victorian, imagining the space filled with the controlled chaos of family life. The sale had moved quickly, money smoothing the path as it always did, but tonight would be the first time Thalia and the girls would see the house. He had wanted to surprise them, to present this concrete evidence of his commitment to their new arrangement. Now, as the appointed hour approached, he found himself uncharacteristically nervous. What if Thalia found the carriage house too small? What if the girls preferred the modern sleekness of his penthouse to this more traditional space? What if this grand gesture came across as presumptuous? Another example of him trying to control outcomes rather than collaborate. The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Through the bay window, he watched as Thalia helped the girls from the back seat, their expressions curious as they surveyed the unfamiliar house. Garrison opened the front door before they could knock. "Welcome to your new home," he said, attempting a casual tone despite the significance of the moment. "Well, potentially, if you like it." Maeve bounded up the steps, her usual energy multiplied by excitement. "Is this where we're going to live, all of us together?" "That's the idea," Garrison confirmed, watching Thalia's face for her reaction. "You and Wren and me here in the main house, and your mum in the carriage house in the backyard, but only if everyone agrees it's a good plan." Wren regarded the house with her typical analytical gaze. "Does it have a place for my rock collection? And somewhere to grow plants?" "It does," Garrison assured her, relieved by her practical questions. "There's a sunroom off the kitchen that would be perfect for plants, and your bedroom has built-in shelves. 4 collections. Can we see?" Maeve asked already, halfway down the hallway. "Can we see everything?" The tour proceeded with increasing enthusiasm. Maeve claimed the bedroom with the window seat, while Wren gravitated toward the one with the best morning light. They discovered a small attic space that could become a rainy day play area, a kitchen nook perfect for breakfast, and to the girls' delight, a backyard oak tree ideal for a future treehouse. Thalia remained quieter, taking in each space with thoughtful consideration. When they reached the carriage house, Garrison held back, allowing her to explore it privately, while he and the girls investigated the garden. "Do ladybugs live here?" Maeve asked, crouching to examine a cluster of daisies. "Wren needs ladybugs for her bug collection." "I think ladybugs can be invited to live here," Garrison replied, smiling at her concern for her sister's interests. "We can plant flowers they especially like." Nearby, Wren was studying the oak tree's bark, likely calculating its age or cataloguing the insects that called it home. The sight of them, so naturally curious and engaged with their surroundings, filled Garrison with a quiet certainty that he had made the right choice. When Thalia emerged from the carriage house, her expression was unreadable. "Girls, why don't you see if you can count all the windows in the main house?" she suggested. "I need to talk to your dad for a minute." Once they were alone, she turned to Garrison with a direct gaze. "This is a significant step." "It is," he agreed, "but one that makes sense for all of us, I think. The girls would have stability. You'd have your own space, but be close enough for bedtime stories and morning pancakes. And He hesitated. Then finished, honestly. I'd have the family life I almost threw away. Thalia studied him, her expression softening slightly. "You've changed, Garrison. More than I thought possible. You sound surprised." "I am," she admitted. "When you first re-entered our lives, I expected the novelty of fatherhood to wear off, for you to drift back to your real priorities once the initial crisis passed." The assessment stung, but he couldn't deny its fairness. "And now?" She gestured toward the house, the garden, the carefully considered spaces. "Now I see someone who's genuinely trying to build something lasting, something that puts the girls first." She paused, then added more quietly, "Someone who might finally be ready for the responsibility he once ran from." "Is that a yes?" Garrison asked, hope rising in his chest. "To the house to this arrangement." Thalia smiled, a real smile, unguarded in a way he hadn't seen directed at him in years. "It's a yes. But Garrison—" Her expression grew serious again. "This needs to be a true partnership, equal input, on decisions that affect the girls. No unilateral moves, no matter how well-intentioned." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "I want to do this right, Thalia. For all of us." From the main house came the sound of running feet and excited voices as the girls explored their potential new home. Maeve appeared at the back door, waving enthusiastically. "Mom, Dad, there's a secret door in the pantry, come see." The casual pairing of Mom and Dad in one breath, something that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, now felt right, natural, as if the universe had finally clicked into its proper alignment. As they walked back toward the house together, Thalia surprised him by briefly touching his arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for becoming the father they deserve." The simple acknowledgement from the woman who had seen both the worst and now, perhaps the best of him, felt more validating than any professional achievement or financial success he had ever attained. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, a moving truck pulled up to the Victorian. Wren supervised the careful transportation of her science equipment and book collection, clipboard in hand, as she checked off each box. Maeve darted from room to room, testing which floors were best for sock sliding, her laughter echoing through spaces that had stood empty for too long. In the kitchen, Garrison and Thalia unpacked dishes side by side, falling into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. "The girls want to plant a garden next spring," Thalia mentioned, placing coffee mugs in a cabinet. "Wren has already designed a planting map with optimal sun exposure calculations." "Of course she has," Garrison said, smiling at this evidence of his daughter's methodical nature. "And Maeve wants to grow pumpkins, the biggest pumpkins in Cambridge, apparently." "Ambitious," he observed, arranging silverware in a drawer. "Wonder where she gets that." Thalia gave him a sidelong glance, amusement playing at her lips. "Some mysteries we may never solve." The teasing felt good, comfortable in a way their interactions hadn't been since the beginning, not a return to their past relationship, but perhaps the foundation of a new one built on shared priorities and mutual respect. That evening, after the moving crew had departed, and the girls were asleep in their new rooms, exhausted from the day's excitement, Garrison stood in the backyard, gazing at the carriage house, where a single lamp glowed in Thalia's window. The main house behind him, with its warm lights and freshly made beds, represented everything he once thought he didn't want or need: Ruth's responsibility, the beautiful constraint of being essential to others. His phone buzzed with a text from Xavier. "How's domestic life treating you? Ready to return to civilization yet?" Garrison looked at the message, then at the houses before him, one large, one small, both containing the people who had become the center of his world. He typed a response, "I am civilization, just took me a while to find it." Pressing send, he turned back toward the main house, where photographs of butterfly costumes and science fair projects already lined the hallway, where twin girls dreamed in rooms painted their favorite colors, where chaotic Sunday breakfasts and homework struggles and holiday celebrations waited to unfold. For the first time in his adult life, Garrison Fletcher, once defined by ambition, achievement, and the relentless pursuit of more, felt the profound contentment of having exactly what he needed, exactly where he needed to be. Snow fell in lazy spirals outside the Victorian's bay windows, transforming Cambridge into a scene from a snow globe. Inside, a fire crackled in the restored fireplace, casting warm light across the living room, where a massive pine tree, the biggest one they had, according to Maeve's excited report, stood only partially decorated, abandoned, while the twins enjoyed their hot chocolate break. "More marshmallows, please," Wren requested, holding out her mug with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Christmas preparations had brought out a more carefree side of her usually serious personality, her scientific precision redirected toward ensuring the tree lights were perfectly spaced and ornament distribution was optimally balanced. "Coming. Right up," Thalia said, dropping another marshmallow into Wren's mug. She wore a festive sweater with snowflakes along the collar, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. 3 months into their new living arrangement, she moved through the main house with increasing comfort, though she still maintained the carriage house as her personal sanctuary. Garrison watched this domestic tableau from the doorway, struck by how different this holiday season felt from any he'd experienced before. Last Christmas had been spent at a luxury resort in Bali, surrounded by beautiful people, whose names he could no longer recall. The Christmas before that, he'd worked through the holiday seeing it as an opportunity to get ahead, while competitors now took time off. Now his priorities had shifted so dramatically that he barely recognized his former self. The executive who had once dismissed family holidays as sentimental distractions was currently wearing reindeer antlers at his daughter's insistence, with no concern for how it might affect his carefully cultivated image. "Dad, you're supposed to be stringing popcorn," Maeve called, noticing his idle reflection. "You said you'd make the longest popcorn string ever." "Right you are," Garrison agreed, moving to rejoin them on the floor, where a bowl of popcorn and a threaded needle awaited his attention. "The longest ever, a world record popcorn string." "Statistically unlikely," Wren commented, not looking up from her methodical arrangement of glass icicles on the lower branches. "The current record is over 300 feet long. We don't have sufficient popcorn supplies." "Wren," Thalia murmured with gentle reproof, "remember what we said about holiday spirit versus factual accuracy? That sometimes it's okay to exaggerate." "For festive purposes," Wren recited, though her expression suggested continued skepticism about this principle. Garrison caught Thalia's eye over the girls' heads, sharing a moment of amused understanding. These small parental alignments had become more frequent lately, silent communications and coordinated responses that made them feel increasingly like a united front, rather than separate entities who happened to share children. "Speaking of festive purposes," Garrison said, deliberately changing the subject, "I was thinking we might take a trip to the Winter Festival at Lewis Park tomorrow. They have ice sculptures and a skating rink." "Can we go, Mom?" Maeve asked immediately, bouncing with anticipation. "I want to skate like the princess in that movie." "I think that sounds wonderful," Thalia agreed, settling onto the couch with her own mug of hot chocolate. Though perhaps with more realistic expectations about skating, abilities for beginners. As the afternoon progressed, the tree slowly transformed from a bare pine to a glittering masterpiece of mismatched ornaments and somewhat unevenly distributed lights. Garrison found himself treasuring the imperfections, the homemade ornaments, with their glitter-glue exuberance, the slightly lopsided star that Wren had insisted on placing herself, despite being barely able to reach with the stepladder. When the last ornament had been hung, a miniature microscope for Wren and a butterfly for Maeve's special gifts Garrison had commissioned from a glass blower they gathered to admire their work. "It's the most beautiful tree in the whole world," Maeve declared with absolute certainty. "It's definitely unique," Wren agreed, which from her was high praise indeed. Later, after dinner and bedtime stories, Garrison and Thalia sat in the quiet living room, the tree lights casting multicolored patterns across the ceiling. These evening moments had become a cherished routine, a time to discuss the girls' development coordinate schedules and occasionally share the kind of honest conversations that were gradually rebuilding trust between them. I got a call from Brielle today, Garrison said, swirling the remnants of his wine. She's engaged. Thalia's eyebrows rose slightly. That was quick. Apparently they were colleagues for years, started dating after our non-wedding. He shrugged, surprised by his own lack of jealousy or regret. She sounds happy. And you, Thalia asked carefully, how do you feel about it? Garrison considered the question, his gaze moving to the family photos that now lined the mantel, Wren proudly displaying her science fair ribbon, Maeve in mid-leap at her dance recital, the four of them at the Apple Orchard this past fall. Honestly, I feel like I dodged a bullet. Not because there was anything wrong with Brielle, but because I almost married someone for all the wrong reasons. And what would the right reasons be? Thalia's question wasn't challenging, but genuinely curious. Love, he said simply, not convenience or social standing or compatible ambitions, just love. He met her gaze directly. I didn't understand that before, I do now. Something shifted in Thalia's expression, a softening, a consideration. You really have changed, she said quietly. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. She smiled, tucking her feet beneath her on the couch. Though I'm still getting used to Garrison Fletcher, master of the popcorn string and wearer of reindeer antlers. He's growing on me too, Garrison admitted with a laugh. Turns out he's a lot happier than the guy in the corner office who worked Christmas Day. They fell into a comfortable silence, the snow continuing to fall outside, enclosing their newfound domesticity in a peaceful cocoon. After a while, Thalia spoke again, her voice thoughtful. The girls want to get you something special for Christmas. They've been saving their allowance and being very secretive about it. The thought of his daughters planning a surprise for him, their first Christmas as a family, filled Garrison with unexpected emotion. They don't need to get me anything. Having them here is more than enough. Try telling them that, Thalia said with a smile. Wren has created a spreadsheet of possibilities, and Maeve has been practicing her rapping with scraps of paper. It's very serious business. Garrison shook his head, amazed once again by these small people who had so thoroughly captured his heart. What about you? He asked the question, emerging before he could consider its implications. What would you like for Christmas? Thalia looked startled, as if the question had caught her off guard. Oh, you don't need to get me anything, Garrison. I know I don't need to, he said gently. But I'd like to. It's been a significant year, to put it mildly. And none of this. He gestured around the cozy room, the decorated tree, the evidence of their shared life, would be possible without your forgiveness and flexibility. She was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Time, she finally said. That's what I'd like. A full day just for me. To read or write or visit a museum without planning around school pickups or bedtimes. The request was so reasonable, so characteristically Thalia, in its simplicity and honesty, that Garrison felt a renewed appreciation for the woman who had given him a second chance at fatherhood. Done, he promised. I'll take the girls for a full day, maybe even overnight. You can have the main house to yourself, complete peace and quiet. That sounds like heaven, Thalia admitted with a laugh. Is that terrible to say? Not at all, Garrison assured her. Even the world's most devoted mother deserves a break sometimes. As the evening drew to a close, Thalia gathered her things to return to the carriage house. At the back door she paused, turning back with an expression Garrison couldn't quite interpret. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of this, for being the father they always deserved. Thank you for giving me the chance to be that father, he replied, equally sincere. I know I didn't earn it. You're earning it now, she said simply, every day. After she'd gone, Garrison moved through the quiet house, checking on the girls, before heading to his own room. Wren slept with her usual precision, perfectly centered in the bed, while Maeve had somehow managed to arrange herself diagonally across her mattress, one arm flung dramatically overhead. Standing in the doorway of Maeve's room, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, Garrison felt a surge of gratitude so intense It was almost painful. How close he had come to missing this, these ordinary moments that now seemed like miracles. How easily he might have continued on his previous path, accumulating wealth and status, but missing the true richness of connection. As he prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with a late-night email from the Singapore office, a crisis requiring immediate attention. 6 months ago, he would have spent the night resolving it regardless of the hour. Now he sent a brief response delegating the issue to his capable team, promising to check in during normal business hours. Some things he had learned could wait until morning. Others, like twin girls who wanted their father to take them ice, skating like quiet moments with the woman who was becoming not just his co-parent, but his friend, could not. Garrison fell asleep that night to the sound of snow tapping gently against his window. The house around him filled with the soft breathing of his family, his heart full with the knowledge that he had finally found his way home. "Higher, Dad, push." "Me higher," Maeve called from the swing, her legs pumping enthusiastically as she sought greater altitude. The backyard garden had transformed with the spring thaw. Wren's meticulously planned vegetable beds were showing their first green shoots, and Maeve's pumpkin patch occupied a sunny corner, though harvest was months away. Garrison obliged with another push, marveling as he often did at Maeve's fearlessness. "Any higher and you'll be in orbit," he warned with mock seriousness. "NASA might recruit you." "I could be an astronaut," she agreed, considering this career possibility with typical openness. Last week she had wanted to be a dolphin trainer, and the week before a pastry chef specializing in cupcakes. Nearby, Wren knelt beside her garden, Bed's clipboard in hand, as she recorded the progress of each seedling. At 6 years old, they had celebrated the twins' birthday last month with a combination science experiment and dance party. She approached gardening with the same methodical focus she applied to everything. "The tomato plants have grown 1.2 centimeters since Monday," she reported without looking up. "But the bean sprouts are showing signs of possible nutrient deficiency. We'll get some plant food tomorrow," Garrison promised, impressed as always by her observations. "Maybe you can help me choose the right kind." From the carriage house, Thalia emerged, carrying a tray with lemonade and cookies, weekend treats that had become part of their family routine. The sight of her, hair pulled back, wearing the gardening overalls the girls had insisted she needed, filled Garrison with a now familiar warmth. Over the past 6 months, their co-parenting arrangement had evolved into something deeper, a friendship, built on mutual respect and shared joy in their daughter's development. "Snack break," Thalia called, setting the tray on the patio table. "Scientists and astronauts need fuel." Maeve executed a flying leap from the swing at its highest point, causing both parents to lunge forward in alarm before she landed safely, if dramatically, on the grass. "Maeve Elizabeth," Thalia scolded, hand pressed to her heart. "We've talked about dismounts, feet on the ground first, then let go." "But that's boring," Maeve protested, though she accepted the cookie Thalia handed her as a peace offering. "Dad says I have good reflexes. Dad also says you need to follow safety rules," Garrison reminded her gently, taking a seat at the table. "Even Olympic gymnasts practice safe landings." As they enjoyed their snack, Garrison found himself observing the easy interaction between Thalia and the girls, the shorthand communication that had developed over years, the instinctive understanding of each child's needs. Though he had made tremendous progress in his relationship with Wren and Maeve, he still felt occasional pangs of regret for the early years he had missed. "You're quiet," Thalia noted, passing him a glass of lemonade. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking," he replied, offering a reassuring smile, "about how much has changed in a year." Indeed, the transformation had been profound. The ambitious CEO who once measured success in acquisitions and profit margins now found greater satisfaction in Wren's thoughtful questions and Maeve's exuberant hugs. The man who had abandoned his pregnant girlfriend out of fear and selfishness had become a father who arranged his schedule around school events and bedtime stories. Dan Thalia, the woman he had so callously dismissed from his life, had somehow found the grace to allow him back in to co-create this unconventional family structure that was working better than any of them might have predicted. "Mom, can Lauren come over tomorrow to see my garden?" Wren asked, carefully wiping cookie crumbs from her fingers. She doesn't believe I'm growing carrots from seeds." "That should be fine," Thalia said, glancing at Garrison for confirmation. Another of their new parenting rhythms, this silent checking in. "Dad has a meeting in the morning, but he'll be home by lunchtime." "Actually," Garrison interjected, "I rescheduled that meeting. Thought we might all go to the botanical gardens tomorrow. They're having a special exhibition on carnivorous plants that Ren might find interesting." Both girls brightened at this proposal, but it was Thalia's pleased surprise that most warmed his heart. These small adjustments, prioritizing family time over work, considering the girls' interests when making plans, had become second nature, but he hadn't lost awareness of how significant they were, how markedly they differed from his previous approach to life. After the girls had returned to their respective pursuits, Ren to her gardening, Maeve to an elaborate fort-building project involving most of the patio furniture, Thalia lingered at the table with Garrison. "That was thoughtful of you to reschedule," she said. "The botanical garden will be perfect for Ren's current plant fascination. And they have a butterfly pavilion for Maeve," he added with a smile. "I try to maintain balance between the science and the spectacle." Thalia laughed, the sound still capable of stirring something in him after all this time. "You've become quite the expert at twin management, specialized attention while avoiding favoritism." "I had a good teacher," he acknowledged, meeting her gaze directly. "Still do." She accepted the compliment with a slight nod, though a faint color rose in her cheeks. These moments, when their conversation shifted from purely practical co-parenting to something more personal, had been occurring with increasing frequency, lately creating a subtle tension neither of them had directly addressed. "I've been meaning to tell you," Thalia said, changing the subject. "The library offered me the children's program coordinator position. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, but also some evening hours for special events." "That's wonderful," Garrison said sincerely. "You've wanted that role for years." "I have," she agreed, pleased by his remembrance of this long-held ambition. "But it would mean some adjustments to our schedule. I'd need your help with the girls when I have evening programs." "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Whatever you need. This is a great opportunity, Thalia. You should absolutely take it." She studied him for a moment as if still surprised by this supportive version of him. "Thank you, I already accepted, actually. I start next month." "We should celebrate," Garrison suggested, impulsively reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "Let me take you to dinner. Just the two of us." The offer hung between them, carrying more significance than a simple meal. Thalia's eyes widened slightly, her expression a complex mixture of surprise, wariness, and something that might have been interest. "Just dinner," he clarified, giving her an easy out. "To celebrate your promotion as friends." "Friends?" She repeated the word, carrying a question she didn't quite articulate. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Dinner would be nice. It's been a while since I ate a meal that didn't involve chicken nuggets or negotiations about vegetable consumption." Relief and anticipation mingled in Garrison's chest. "Perfect. I'll arrange for Xavier and his wife to watch the girls. They've been asking to spend more time with their goddaughters anyway." The conversation might have continued exploring this subtle shift in their relationship, but Maeve chose that moment to call for reinforcements with her fort construction, and the moment passed. Yet, as they moved to help her secure a blanket across two chairs, Garrison felt a hopeful certainty that something important had just happened. A door opening to possibilities he had long considered closed. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep and Thalia had retired to the carriage house, Garrison sat on the back porch, enjoying the spring air and the distant chorus of frogs from the small pond at the end of their property. His phone buzzed, with a text from Xavier. "All set for Friday night. The girls can stay over if you want. Give you and Thalia some more time." The suggestion in those ellipses wasn't subtle, but Garrison chose not to correct his friend's assumption. The truth was more complicated than Xavier could understand. What was developing between him and Thalia wasn't a simple rekindling of old flames or a convenient reconciliation. It was something entirely new, a relationship built on the solid foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than the passionate but ultimately unstable connection of their youth. Whether it would evolve into something romantic remained uncertain. What Garrison did know with increasing clarity was that Thalia Winters had become essential to his happiness in ways that extended beyond their shared children. Her intelligence, her quiet strength, her unfailing integrity, qualities he had once taken for granted, now seemed rare and precious. And if he was being completely honest with himself, the feeling taking root in his heart was deeper and more substantial than anything he'd felt during their first relationship. It wasn't the headlong rush of youthful passion, but something steadier, more enduring. A recognition of her worth that had come ironically through the very separation he had once initiated. From the carriage house, a light still glowed in Thalia's window. Garrison found himself wondering what she was doing, reading perhaps, or planning activities for her new position at the library. The physical proximity yet emotional distance between their current living spaces seemed an apt metaphor for their relationship, connected, but separate, intimate yet bounded. Whether those boundaries would remain, shift, or dissolve entirely was a question he wasn't ready to answer. For now it was enough to know that Friday's dinner represented a step into new territory, an acknowledgement that their story might not be finished after all, but merely entering an unexpected new chapter. With that thought providing a pleasant anticipation, Garrison turned off the porch light and headed inside, leaving the carriage house light to glow softly in the spring darkness, a beacon of possibilities yet to be explored. Garrison adjusted his tie for the third time, scrutinizing his reflection with uncharacteristic uncertainty. He had chosen a charcoal suit rather than his usual navy, less businesslike, more appropriate for a dinner that wasn't quite a date, but wasn't merely a friendly meal either. "You look handsome, Dad," Wren observed from his doorway, her analytical gaze missing nothing. "Is that a new tie?" "It is," he confirmed, touched by her notice. "Do you approve?" She considered this seriously, head tilted. "Mom likes blue better than red, but the pattern is mathematically interesting. I think she'll like it." The casual insight that Thalia had preferences he might have forgotten or never properly appreciated highlighted how much he still had to learn about the woman he had once thought he knew completely. "Thank you for the fashion consultation," he said, smiling at his daughter. "Are you excited about staying with Uncle Xavier and Aunt Mira tonight?" Wren nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. "Maeve is more excited. She wants to make midnight cookies. I'm bringing my star chart because Uncle Xavier has a telescope." She paused, then asked with careful casualness, "Are you and Mom going on a date?" The question caught Garrison off guard. "It's a celebration dinner," he explained, kneeling to her eye level, "for Mom's new job at the library." "But just you and Mom?" Wren pressed her perceptiveness sometimes beyond her years. "No other people?" "Yes, just us," he acknowledged. "Is that okay with you?" She considered this, her small brow furrowed. "Will it change things if you and Mom go on dates?" The question struck at the heart of what Garrison himself had been wondering. Would tonight shift the careful balance they had established? Would it complicate the family dynamic that seemed to be working so well? "I don't know," he admitted, opting for honesty over false reassurance. "But one thing won't change no matter." "What? Mom and I both love you and Maeve more than anything, and we're always going to be your parents together even if other things change." This seemed to satisfy her. "Logical," she pronounced, the highest praise in her vocabulary. "Change is a constant variable anyway." Before he could respond to this remarkably mature observation, Maeve bounded into the room, already wearing her backpack, shaped like butterfly wings. "Uncle X is here. He brought his big car with the moonroof." Her gaze fell on Garrison, and she paused in her excitement. "Wow, Dad, you look fancy." "Thank you," he said, straightening. "Remember to listen to Uncle Xavier and Aunt Mira, okay? And no staying up all night." "Midnight cookies," she corrected him solemnly. "Aunt Mira promised. That's different from all night." The precision of this argument, so reminiscent of her mother's logical way of thinking, made him smile. "Fair point. Midnight cookies it is." After the girls had departed with Xavier amid much excitement and last-minute requests, Wren's favorite astronomy book, Maeve's Special Pillow, the house fell into an unusual quiet. Garrison found himself strangely nervous as he waited for Thalia, who had insisted on getting ready in the carriage house to maintain the special nature of the evening. When the doorbell rang, a formality they rarely observed in their daily comings and goings, he opened it to find Thalia standing there in a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and she wore a pair of silver earrings he recognized from their past life together. "You look beautiful," he said simply, the words inadequate for the effect her presence had on him. "Thank you," she replied, a slight flush rising to her cheeks. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The momentary awkwardness, this reframing of their relationship from co-parents to something else, dissolved as he offered his arm with a touch of old-fashioned courtesy. "Shall we? Our reservation is at 7. The restaurant he had chosen was new to both of them, an intimate French bistro that had opened in Cambridge the previous month. He had deliberately avoided places they had frequented in their past relationship, wanting this evening to feel fresh rather than nostalgic. As they were seated at a corner table, soft lighting, casting a warm glow over the white tablecloth, Garrison found himself studying Thalia with new appreciation. The past year had revealed depths to her he hadn't fully recognized during their first relationship. Her resilience in raising the twins alone, her generosity in allowing him back into their lives, her quiet confidence in who she was and what mattered to her. "You're staring," she noted, a smile playing at her lips as she opened her menu. "I'm admiring," he corrected. "There's a difference." She gave him a look that was both skeptical and pleased. "Smooth talker. Some things haven't changed." "Many things have," he countered, his tone growing more serious, "including how I see you." The directness of this statement caused her to pause, her menu forgotten. "And how do you see me now?" It was a question that deserved a thoughtful answer. Garrison took a moment, wanting to express exactly what he meant. "I see someone who taught me what real strength looks like. Not power or control or financial success, but the kind of strength that puts others first without losing yourself. That forgives without forgetting. That builds something beautiful from circumstances that would break most people." Thalia's expression softened surprise, and something deeper flickering in her eyes. "That's not what I expected you to say." "What did you expect?" She shrugged lightly, though her eyes remained on his. "Something about how I look in this dress, perhaps, or how nice it is to have an adult conversation without interruptions about juice boxes or bathroom breaks." "Those things are true as well," he acknowledged with a smile, "but less important than what I've come to admire about you." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the waiter, and they turned their attention to ordering. Yet Garrison could feel a shift in the atmosphere between them, a dropping of defenses, a willingness to engage beyond the safe territory of co-parenting discussions. Over appetizers, they spoke of Thalia's new position and her plans for expanding the library's children's programming. During the main course, Garrison shared developments at his company, including a new focus on corporate social responsibility that had been partly inspired by his changing perspective on what constituted meaningful success. It was only over dessert, a shared crème brûlée that Thalia insisted they couldn't each order separately, that the conversation turned more personal. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, setting down her spoon, "what would have happened if we'd stayed together, if you hadn't left when I told you I was pregnant?" The question was one Garrison had contemplated often over the past year, particularly in quiet moments watching the twins sleep or during family dinners when the four of them fell into moments of perfect harmony. "I do," he admitted, "but I'm not sure we would have made it even if I'd stayed." She looked surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because I wasn't ready," he said simply. "Not for fatherhood, certainly, but not for real partnership either. I was too focused on my own ambitions, too convinced that success could only look one way." He met her gaze directly. "I would have resented the constraints of family life, and you would have grown to resent me for that resentment." Thalia considered this assessment, nodding slowly. "You might be right. We were in such different places then. I was ready to build a life centered around family, and you were determined to conquer the business world." "And now?" he asked, the question encompassing far more than their current professional situations. She was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Now I think we understand each other better. We've both grown up in different ways. You've learned that success isn't just about business achievements, and I've learned that I can be both a mother and a person with my own ambitions. We make a good team, Garrison observed the statement both obvious and profound. We do, Thalia agreed. For the girls. The qualification hung between them, a boundary she was perhaps not yet ready to cross. Garrison nodded, accepting her caution. For the girls, he echoed. Though I think it's more than that now. Their eyes met across the table, the unspoken possibilities. Almost tangible in the small space between them. Thalia took a breath as if preparing to say something significant, then seemed to reconsider. We should take things slowly, she said finally, for everyone's sake. I agree, Garrison replied, though his heart raced at the implicit acknowledgement that there was something to take slowly. That this wasn't just a celebratory dinner between co-parents, but the potential beginning of something more. We've built something important for Ren and Maeve. I wouldn't want to jeopardize that. Neither would I. Her expression softened. But I also wouldn't want to miss something meaningful because we were afraid to explore it. The honesty of her statement, the tentative opening of a door they had both been circling, filled Garrison with quiet joy. Then we'll explore carefully at whatever pace feels right. They lingered over coffee, their conversation shifting to lighter topics. Maeve's latest dance recital, Ren's growing rock collection, memories of their first date years ago at a cafe that no longer existed. The evening took on a dreamlike quality, suspended between their complicated past and an uncertain but hopeful future. When they finally returned home, the house quiet and empty, without the twins' energy, Garrison walked Thalia to the carriage house door. The night air was cool, but not cold stars visible above the old oak tree that had become Maeve's favorite climbing spot. Thank you for tonight, Thalia said, turning to face him at her doorstep. It was... She paused, searching for the right word. A beginning, Garrison suggested gently. She smiled, the expression illuminated by the soft porch light. Yes, a beginning. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Garrison leaned forward slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished. Instead, she met him halfway, her lips touching his in a kiss that was both familiar and entirely new, a bridge between who they had been and who they were becoming. When they parted, her eyes remained on his, a new warmth in their depths. Good night, Garrison, she said softly. Good night, Thalia. As he walked back to the main house, Garrison felt lighter than he had in years, as if some final piece of himself had clicked into place. Whatever happened next, whether this tentative new beginning blossomed into something deeper or simply strengthened their co-parenting bond, he knew with absolute certainty that his life had found its true center in this unexpected family he had almost lost through his own short-sightedness, and for that realization alone, he would be forever grateful. Daddy, watch me, Maeve called, balancing precariously on the edge of the fountain in the courtyard of Fletcher Technologies' newly completed Boston headquarters. Despite Garrison's instinctive surge of anxiety, he resisted the urge to rush forward, and instead watched with careful attention as she executed a perfect cartwheel along the wide stone edge. Impressive, he acknowledged, applauding as she finished with a dramatic bow. But maybe next time a little further from the water. 6 months had passed since that pivotal dinner with Thalia, 6 months of careful exploration and gradual deepening of their relationship. Today marked another milestone, the official opening of the company's new headquarters, a project Garrison had been overseeing for the past year, alongside his evolving family life. Where's Ren? Thalia asked, joining them in the courtyard after speaking with some of the other guests. She looked elegant in a simple emerald dress, her hair swept up in a style that reminded Garrison of the day she had appeared at his wedding 3 years ago, a moment that had irrevocably changed the course of all their lives. With Xavier in the Innovation Lab, Garrison replied, smiling at the memory of his daughter's wide-eyed fascination with the research facilities. She's interrogating the engineering team about sustainable building materials. I think we may have a future CEO on our hands. Thalia laughed, slipping her hand into his with the easy affection they had gradually rediscovered. Just what the world needs. Another Fletcher running things. A Fletcher Winters, he corrected, squeezing her hand gently. The best of both worlds. The day had been designed as both a corporate celebration and a family affair, a reflection of Garrison's transformed priorities. Board members mingled with the twins' school teachers, business partners chatted with Thalia's colleagues from the library. Even Brielle had come with her new husband, their initial awkwardness giving way to a cordial relationship that had surprised everyone, including themselves. As the afternoon progressed toward the official ribbon-cutting ceremony, Garrison found himself drawn to a quiet moment of reflection. He stood at the window of his new office watching the gathering below. From this vantage point, he could see Wren explaining something to Xavier with animated hand gestures, Maeve charming a group of investors with her exuberant storytelling, and Thalia engaged in conversation with his mother, who had finally met her granddaughters last Christmas. "Penny, for your thoughts." He turned to find Thalia in the doorway, her expression curious. "Just taking it all in," he admitted, gesturing toward the scene below. 3 years ago I had everything I thought I wanted and nothing I actually needed. Now, she prompted, moving to stand beside him. "Now I have everything that matters," he finished simply. She studied him, her eyes warm with understanding. "You've come a long way from that man who sent me away when I told him I was pregnant." "I have," he agreed without defensiveness or shame. The acknowledgement of his past failings had become easier with time, part of the ongoing process of making amends through actions rather than mere words. "Though I still have a long way to go." "Don't we all?" Thalia said, her tone lightening. "Speaking of which, your daughters are currently convincing the catering staff that ice cream before dinner is a perfectly reasonable nutritional choice." "Our daughters," he corrected gently, a reminder that had become less necessary, but no less meaningful over time. An ice cream before dinner might be acceptable on special occasions. "This is certainly a special occasion," Thalia agreed, her gaze taking in the office, with its blend of professional efficiency and personal touches, the twins' artwork framed alongside business awards, family photos, interspersed with corporate milestones. The intercom buzzed, interrupting their moment. "Mr. Fletcher, they're ready for the ribbon cutting whenever you are." "We'll be right down," Garrison replied, straightening his tie in a gesture that had once been purely about maintaining his professional image but now felt more like preparation for a family photograph, a small adjustment before an important memory was captured. As they prepared to leave the office, Thalia paused at the door. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone casual, though her eyes held a deeper meaning, "about the carriage house." "What about it?" Garrison asked, curious about this unexpected topic. "I'm wondering if we might repurpose it," she said carefully. "Perhaps as a writing studio, or a guest house for when my parents visit." It took a moment for the implication to register, and when it did, Garrison felt a surge of hope so strong it nearly took his breath away. "And where would you be in this scenario?" Thalia's smile was both shy and certain. "Where I've been heading for the past 6 months, I think. Home. With you and the girls. If that's what you want too." The simplicity of her proposal, moving from their carefully maintained separate spaces into a true shared life, belied its profound significance. For Thalia, who had protected her independence and the twins' stability with such care, this represented the final dissolution of boundaries they had both needed during their reconciliation process. "It's what I want," Garrison confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "It's what I've wanted for longer than I've been able to admit even to myself." Instead of the kiss he might have expected at such a moment, Thalia surprised him by reaching into her purse and removing a small velvet box. "Then you might want this back," she said, opening it to reveal a simple platinum band. His wedding ring from their almost marriage, years before the one he had returned to her, along with her engagement ring when he'd walked away. "I kept it," she explained, seeing his confusion. "Not out of sentimentality at first, more as a reminder of promises that shouldn't be made lightly. But lately, I've been thinking it might be ready for a second chance. Like us." The symbolism, this physical token of commitment being offered not in the context of a grand gesture or public declaration, but in a quiet moment of mutual understanding, seemed perfectly aligned with the relationship they had carefully rebuilt honest, private-rooted, in reality rather than fantasy. "Are you proposing to me, Thalia Winters?" Garrison asked, a smile spreading across his face despite the emotion tightening his throat. "I'm suggesting that perhaps we've been engaged in the ways that matter for some time now," she replied. "The girls need stability. We've created that together, and I think—" She paused, her expression softening. "I think we've earned the right to be happy together." Before he could respond, a commotion at the door announced the arrival of the twins, both slightly breathless from running up the stairs. "Dad, Mom, everyone's waiting," Maeve announced dramatically. "Uncle X says they can't cut the ribbon without you, and I need to document the exact time for my project log," Wren added, holding up the digital watch Garrison had given her for her birthday. "We're coming," Thalia assured them, quickly slipping the ring box back into her purse with a meaningful glance at Garrison. "Your father has an important ceremony to lead." As they were herded toward the elevator by their impatient daughters, Garrison found a brief moment to whisper in Thalia's, yes." She looked up at him, a question in her eyes. "To everything," he clarified. "The ring, the house, the future. Yes, to all of it." Her smile, radiant and genuine, was all the confirmation he needed that they were at last on the same path. Ribbon-cutting ceremony proceeded with appropriate corporate fanfare, speeches about innovation, and community investment applause from shareholders and employees alike. But when the moment came to actually cut the ribbon, Garrison surprised everyone by calling Thalia and the twins forward. "Fletcher Technologies has always been about building the future," he said into the microphone, looking out at the gathered crowd. "But I've learned that the most important foundations we lay aren't made of concrete and steel. They're made of love, commitment, and second chances." He handed the ceremonial scissors to Wren and Maeve, positioning their small hands around the handles, while he and Thalia guided from behind. "Together," he instructed, as the four of them brought the blades together, severing the ribbon to enthusiastic applause. As confetti fluttered down around them, and photographers captured the moment for corporate archives and family albums alike, Garrison felt a profound sense of completion. The company he had built would continue to evolve and grow, perhaps one day under Wren's analytical leadership, or influenced by Maeve's creative vision. But its success, however measured, would always be secondary to the family that had forever changed his definition of true wealth. Later that evening, after the celebrations had concluded and the twins were asleep in their rooms, no longer temporary accommodations, but permanent spaces filled with their unique personalities, Garrison and Thalia sat on the back porch of their shared home, a single light glowing in the now empty carriage house across the garden. "So," Thalia said, resting her head against his shoulder in a gesture that had become delightfully familiar, "what's next for Garrison Fletcher? Now that you've opened the new headquarters, reconciled with your long-lost family, and agreed to make an honest woman of me at last." He laughed softly, his arm tightening around her. "I was thinking of something revolutionary, something I've never truly attempted before." "Oh," she asked, looking up at him with curious amusement. "And what might that be?" "Being exactly where I am," he said simply, "not chasing the next achievement or acquisition, not running from responsibilities or connections, just being present, with you, with the girls, with whatever life brings next." Thalia's expression softened, understanding the significance of this intention from a man who had spent most of his life in perpetual motion, always focused on the horizon rather than the ground beneath his feet. "That sounds suspiciously like happiness," she observed, a smile playing at her lips. "I believe it might be," Garrison agreed, gazing at the home they had built together. Not just the physical structure with its imperfect charm, but the family within it, equally imperfect and infinitely more precious. Who would have thought, as the evening deepened around them, crickets singing in the garden? Wren had so carefully planted the porch swing, creaking gently beneath them. Garrison reflected on the long and unexpected journey that had led him here. From ambitious young entrepreneur to callous deserter, from successful but empty CEO to father seeking redemption, and finally to this, a man who had discovered that the true measure of success was not what you accumulated, but what you cherished. Not what you controlled, but what you nurtured. In the nursery rhyme, Maeve loved the butterfly emerged transformed after its time in the cocoon, not a different creature entirely, but the fulfillment of potential that had been present all along. Perhaps Garrison thought his own transformation had followed a similar pattern. The capacity for love and commitment had always existed within him. It had simply taken the courage of a woman who refused to let him hide from his responsibilities and the unconditional acceptance of two small girls to bring it fully to life. "We should go in," Thalia said eventually, though she made no move to rise. "It's getting late." "In a minute," Garrison replied, unwilling to relinquish this perfect moment just yet. "I'm still getting used to the view." She followed his gaze to the starlit sky above their garden, but his eyes weren't on the heavens. They were on her face, on the home they shared, on the life they had created from the broken pieces of the past, a life more beautiful and meaningful than any he could have designed for himself. "It is a pretty spectacular view," Thalia agreed, understanding his true meaning, "worth waiting for." And in that simple exchange, in the quiet acknowledgement of how far they had come and the unspoken promise of all that still lay ahead, Garrison found the peace he had been seeking his entire life without ever knowing its true name.